Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Claire Robinson. I'm the Customer Relationship Manager at KRC. Welcome to today's webinar, PRINCE2 Agile, What's in it and What's in it for me? You can download the slides from today's webinar at AgileKRC.com. Go to the Resources tab, then click on Free Downloads. While you're in the resources section of the website, you might want to check out the webinars page where you can access some of our webinar archive. You can also find all of our webinars on our YouTube channel. Just search for AgileKRC. I'm shortly going to pass you over to Keith, but just a couple of things before I do. If you want to tweet about our webinar, please use the hashtag PRINCE2 Agile. You can see that there on your screen. If you'd like to hear more from Keith about this subject and much more, you can check out his blog at agilekrc.com/blog. I'd also like to point out a couple of features of the control panel, just in case this is your first time using the software. So if you look at the top right-hand side of your screen, you'll see an orange box with a white arrow. Click on this to maximize or minimize your control panel. If you'd like to ask a question, just type your question into the question box and Keith will take as many of these as he can at the end. You'll be able to see Keith's webcam on your screen. You have control of how you configure your screen. So just click and drag the double lines till you're happy with how this looks. You can also click on the small box in the lower right corner of the webcam screen, and this will move where it appears on your screen. I'm afraid you won't be able to see Keith if you're watching the recording. You can only see Keith's webcam if you're watching this live. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to your presenter, Keith Richards.
Thank you very much for the introduction there, Claire, and welcome again to everybody. This is our highest attended webinar so far, and quite excited about this one. It's a very interesting subject, but also we're running on new software, and as the regulars will know, if it can go wrong, it normally does, but we're agile and we're going to respond to anything that gets thrown at us. One thing is we normally start off with an analysis of a registration question. Well, because of the new software, we haven't actually got a registration question this time. And also, I can't really give any name checks to a lot of people around the world because we haven't actually got your country and organisation. Now, if you are abroad, and when I say abroad, I mean outside the UK, if you'd like to send your country to Claire in the question box, then that would be appreciated. I think about 60%, maybe 2/3 are UK based. If you do want to do that, please file through, and we're already getting Canada, Poland, Belgium, all coming through. So that's really good news. Right, without any further ado, let's get on with this presentation. I've got a couple of quiz questions for you as we go through, and got a couple of polls, and that'll be exciting, as you know. Normally the software goes a bit funny when we do a poll. Presentation structure, just really going to give you some latest news. What's the drivers for PRINCE2 Agile? Who's it for? We're going to look at some basics in PRINCE2 Agile. One of the things I'm keen to do over the sort of coming months with these kind of webinars is maybe go into a bit more detail in certain areas. And what we're going to do on this webinar is look a bit more at the behaviours side in terms of PRINCE2 Agile and Agile in general. We're going to end with something to link into the blog about how process relates to behaviours. So hopefully I'd like to get your feedback on that because there's a very wide range of opinions in that area. In terms of introductions, I won't read the whole slide there to save time, but just as you're probably aware, lead author for the new PRINCE2 Agile product, also chief examiner, also was lead author for DSDM back in 2007. So, you know, it's one of those things you think you'd only do it once, but I've managed to do that twice. In terms of latest news, here's the sort of bulletins and such like for you. Firstly, launch date is June the 24th. There's various, I think dates have been there. Axelos have got another product coming out, and I think that's one of the reasons why the launch date has been put back a little bit. Many ATOs are in preparation. I've been responsible for running 2 Train the Trainer events, so I know the ATOs are ramping up for this. One question we had from someone earlier is about a boilerplate course for the ATOs, and all the ATOs do have a boilerplate course. You know, they're ready to go on this. The course is a 3-day course. Exam is going to be a 2.5-hour exam, and then the practice runs we've done so far, I say practice, they were real, but they were the first people in. The word coming back is challenging. Very important to get across that this exam, part of the whole idea of this new product was to make something that provided, if you like, a benchmark for the industry. And this exam is not a stay awake to pass exam. The questions are all level 3 and level 4 from Bloom's, if you're into that sort of stuff, meaning it's not a question of, what's the highest mountain. You do have to apply and know what PRINCE2 Agile is in order to pass the exam. The actual manual, and there's a picture there on the screen, that's going to be released on June the 16th, so you can purchase it then from TSO. And there's various things like LinkedIn groups are appearing, and when we get to the end of this, if anyone's got any more questions on latest news, I'll do my best to answer as best I can. So that's the latest news on PRINCE2 Agile. Now, just recap, we did a new kid on the block webinar maybe about 2-3 months ago, and I appreciate we've got a lot of new people on the webinar today. But the drivers, if you like, and the audience of PRINCE2 Agile, why does it come about? The simple reason for that is actually just pure demand. Practitioners are asking for it, Agile's everywhere, people are coming into contact with Agile, and one of the most trickiest parts of writing the PRINCE2 Agile guidance was actually what's called context, because every context you apply PRINCE2 in, or you're using Agile in, is not the same. It's not a question of I'm turning up and I'm finding they're using Scrum. You might turn up and they're using Kanban. You might turn up and they're not using anything, or they're doing Fragile Agile. Equally, you might find they're actually quite a mature Agile environment. So the manual and the guidance has been written with this sort of view of there's a basic Agile sort of view, there's a mature Agile view. And by that, basic Agile is just, backlog and sprint, and hey, we're doing some stand-ups. Mature Agile, they're talking about releases, they're talking about vision, and they're talking about product roadmaps. This will be a much more sophisticated level of Agile. And to be straight with you, if the Agile is so mature that it's, highly optimized and it's very good, I'm not going to make any sort of other statement, then you probably don't need PRINCE2 to help you. There's no point reinventing the wheel. But another thing, if you're a PRINCE2 organization encountering Agile, and a lot of the people on the sort of train the trainer events, I'd say 2/3 didn't really have a lot of exposure to Agile in terms of the experience. Now, from a software domain, you're going to have a very high figure. The vast majority are going to have exposure to Agile. But remember, PRINCE2 is generic to any project. It's not just IT, and therefore, there's no Agile. We want to go Agile. The PRINCE2 Agile guidance is going to help you in that respect. One quick thing, I just want to go through something on a slide. I have to be honest, I haven't got the time at the moment to look through all the LinkedIn groups and all the blogs and all the forums, but few people send me links and various things that I'm hearing. One of the things I keep getting sort of mentioned is, why do we need this? Is there any point? Now, not everybody likes change, not everybody likes something new, but it is new and it's responding to demand, and I would suggest that responding to change, and I don't know if you've spotted that phrase before somewhere, is inherently Agile. So something else comes out, look at it, see if you like it, does it fit? If it does, use it, and if it doesn't, use something else. Some of the things I've read on say blogs and forums, it comes across as though PRINCE2 Agile is a sort of tax that we've all got to pay, and the simple fact is, it's a product, it's a new product, and if it addresses your needs, then use it. Things like SAFE have come out recently, very big IT sort of focus method. A lot of people are using that in a lot of contexts, and it's working quite well. But in other contexts, it won't work particularly well. So it's a bit like, I often use the analogy of a fork. A fork is very good at certain things, for example, eating spaghetti, but it's not very good at eating soup. So the same goes with PRINCE2, PRINCE2 Agile, Scrum, whatever you care to mention. And the market's going to decide. The bottom line is, if we were all you know, if we only wanted one thing or we didn't need it, we'd all be using one phone, one car, and watching one TV channel. So, do we need it? Well, we'll find out, and we'll let the market decide on that one. But certainly, Axelos have created it purely because of the demand, and they've been asked to create this product. I want to go through some basics now on what PRINCE2 Agile is, and these are quite interesting because I've sort of written the line there, myth busting or stating the obvious. It really depends on your knowledge of PRINCE2, whether you think these are surprises or, hey, there's nothing new. So these are actually in the PRINCE2 Agile manual and form part of the whole sort of foundations for the PRINCE2 Agile sort of concept, if you like. The first one is the fact that PRINCE2 Agile is actually already enabled for Agile. The lead author of PRINCE2 2009 was a guy called Andy Murray, and they spend a lot of time just making sure that the plumbing and the structures were in PRINCE2 to enable it to be used for Agile, along with other things. So the key thing about PRINCE2 Agile is you do not need to take anything out, you don't need to remove anything, you actually just need to configure it appropriately and tailor it. PRINCE2 is not a traditional project management approach. A lot of people associate it with waterfall and bureaucracy, but actually PRINCE2 is just a framework, and you can apply it exactly how you want to. You can run it waterfall if you like, you can run it agile, but it's not a traditional PM approach in terms of the stereotype, if you like. PRINCE2 Agile is for any project, not just IT projects. I'm getting this question a lot. The IT frameworks that are very popular in the Agile domain, you know, for example, Scrum, Extreme Programming, SAFe, you know, these sort of frameworks, they are mentioned but not extensively because PRINCE2 is a generic project management approach, and the whole manual is not about linking with every single sort of framework that's out there. Another one of these basics is to state quite clearly, because some people, in fact, 20, 30, 40% of people I run into think that Agile is Scrum, and it's not just Scrum. There's a much bigger environment that makes up the whole Agile way of working. The book is focused on Scrum and Kanban, though. They are by far the most popular. They would make up, you know, 70, 80, 90% of everything you see in terms of Agile, you know, according to most surveys. Therefore, the book is geared to how do you integrate with Scrum, how do you integrate with Kanban. But it's not just how do you integrate, it actually talks to you about what Scrum is and trains you in Scrum. It tells you what Kanban is and trains you in Kanban. So as part of the course, you're actually getting trained in Scrum and trained in Kanban. It's not just you put Scrum in here. It goes through the whole Scrum guide. There's a lot of practical exercises on Scrum. So when you come out of the course, you'll know what Scrum is. PRINCE2 Agile needed to define what Agile actually is, and this is quite tricky because there was a very big group that worked on this. There was about 40 of us, and nobody came up with a single definition of what Agile was. So we had to create a definition as PRINCE2 Agile sees it. So we're not trying to say, sorry everyone, this is how Agile is. We're just saying, from a point of view of PRINCE2 Agile, when you're using you know, this approach, this is what Agile is, and it's really a collection of sort of behaviours, frameworks, concepts, and techniques. And I'll show you a slide on that later. Another important thing, and this was quite interesting, slightly tricky, but Agile is not binary, and by that I mean there is no such thing, and I'm not trying to be controversial here. There's no such thing as an Agile project. Because if there is, then that means there are projects that are not Agile. But what we do with one of the concepts in PRINCE2 Agile, called the Agileometer, is to actually look at how Agile you can be on a project. Some projects you can be very Agile, and some projects maybe not so Agile. But it's always a question of how much, you know, degree. It just isn't a yes or no. A lot of companies I work with have a sort of decision at the beginning of kicking off a project, and it says, you know, Agile project or not an Agile project. This isn't a smart way of thinking. This isn't a smart way of working. It's not yes or no. Make sure in your organisations you haven't got this fork in the road, as I call it, between going Agile and not Agile. So as I say, it's a matter of how much, it's not a binary condition. So what's actually in PRINCE2 Agile? Well, it's based on PRINCE2, and again, I'm going to reiterate, nothing is removed from PRINCE2. There's nothing that inhibits or prohibits Agile. What you need to do is configure, tailor, blend and weave Agile concepts into the Prince way of working. So there's 5 things you see on the screen there. One is integrating with, say, Agile frameworks, the classic ones being Scrum, Kanban and such like. How do you link with these? What do they look like? What do they do? Agile behaviours, I'll come on to that in a moment, because that's one bit that you could say is missing from PRINCE2, but not necessarily wrong. There's focus areas, so things like requirements, Agile risk, the idea of releases, communication. This is not actually talked about in detail in PRINCE2, but if you're going to work in an Agile context, then you have to get into these things, and they're known as focus areas. Now, one of the sort of ironies with Agile is a lot of it is actually a body of techniques. When you hear people talking stand-up meetings, user stories, using a whiteboard and all this, they're just techniques really, and you could use them in any way of working. You could use them on a waterfall project. So the PRINCE2 Agile manual has a wide range and a large repository of techniques that you can use on your projects by trying to bring it all into one place. A sort of one-stop shop, if you like, is what we're trying to achieve with PRINCE2 Agile. Now, the concepts area is just trying to bring in what are called concepts from an Agile point of view, such as things like iterative and incremental, the idea of playing with features, prioritization. This is what makes Agile Agile. It's funnily enough, it's not really the techniques that make Agile Agile, because they're very interdependent, you can use them anywhere. It's actually some of the fundamental concepts of Agile that differentiate it from, say, a waterfall way of working. So that's what's actually in PRINCE2. It's a large body of knowledge, and it's trying to bring in everything Agile into PRINCE2 Agile so that you can run PRINCE2 with this sort of Agile setting. Now, a question we get asked a lot is about Agile PM. Where does it fit? There's a lot of people using Agile PM. Here at AgileKRC, we run a regular monthly public schedule course. I think we're the longest running company to have done this. We've been running it for 4 years. I think we missed one August in 1 year, but it's run every single month. And we are, great fans of Agile PM. But I do want to explain where it fits into PRINCE2 Agile. And the first thing is to say that it actually doesn't. What we have here is 2 things, Agile PM and PRINCE2 Agile, that are going after the same market, the same area, of the same budget. They basically do the same job. Now, this is a very common question, and pre-2009, DSDM, and that's the sort of same thing as Agile PM. Agile PM is based on the DSDM framework. It's one and the same thing, really. DSDM plugged the gaps that were in PRINCE2 pre-2009 with respect to working in an Agile way. So, for example, the idea of prioritization was not in PRINCE2 pre-2009. Neither was the idea of what I would call scope tolerance, and there wasn't really any sort of techniques in there. Now, from 2009 onwards, with the rewrite of PRINCE2, all of those gaps were closed off. So there's no need to integrate them anymore. Now, as you may be aware, I've written a book on that, which is now, if you like, defunct, which, okay, came as a little bit of a surprise, but what I'm trying to say is PRINCE2 Agile is a way of running projects in an Agile context, and so is Agile PM. You wouldn't do the 2 together. Now, what you do with that depends on your own sort of situation, because if you're a PRINCE2 organization, then I would just go down the PRINCE2 Agile route. I don't think there's any other route to go down in terms of going Agile. However, if you're not a PRINCE2 organisation and you've got a blank canvas, then really you can choose either of those approaches. So you could go down Agile PM, which might be a bit quicker, or you might invest in PRINCE2 and then go down to PRINCE2 Agile. Now, another scenario which one of our customers has got is PRINCE2 has got a very bad reputation and is disliked by people. So the idea of going DSDM, Agile PM was quite attractive to bring in, you know, a sort of, if you like, what's it called, a new broom sweeping out some of the problems they had. Now the irony is that actually that's not the fault of PRINCE2, because PRINCE2, as I say, it's a bit like a fork. If you're eating, it does one thing particularly well. So if you're eating spaghetti, great. If you're eating soup, not so good. So it's not PRINCE2's fault that it's got, if you like, baggage. It's just a poor implementation of it. But you know, you are where you are. That's why it says it depends on your sort of situation. But they are very similar approaches in terms of addressing what you know, the problem they're trying to solve. I would say there's a lot more in PRINCE2 Agile. So you know, specifically things like Scrum, specifically Kanban. It also includes some of the newer stuff that's in the Agile space, such as Cynefin. You might want to look that up, some work by Dave Snowden, and it's very impressive. And also Lean Startup. In PRINCE2 Agile, we do major on sort of Lean Startup and some of the concepts, and I'll come to that later. I think historically there's an interesting relationship between sort of Agile PM and PRINCE2. If you went back 10 years, they were different, and I'm using the analogy there on the screen of in British politics, if you were in the 80s, you know, you'd be looking at you know, very clearly clear differences between, say, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. Now everybody's trying to go for the centre ground, if you like, and it's quite hard to tell the difference between the parties sometimes. And the same goes with Agile PM and PRINCE2, in the sense that they've both sort of stolen things from each other, and they've ended up in a sort of very similar place. You know, Agile PM and DSDM has taken some really good Prince things. Equally, Prince has taken some pretty good things from DSDM, and they're ending up in a very similar area. Now, if you've got a project management training course, within 2 hours you'll be hit with a triangle, and with PRINCE2 Agile, maybe we have got rid of the triangles forever. Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. But I found these 6 on the internet within about 2 minutes. None of them are the same, and they sort of drive after the 3 main sort of areas, if you like, of time, cost and quality, or variations on the theme. I never work out how you can show 4 things with a triangle, but a couple of those manage to do that. Now, with PRINCE2 Agile, we move to a different concept called the Hexagon. And what we try to do with PRINCE2 Agile is set up how we would run PRINCE2 in an Agile context. And what we do with the tolerances, and this is the key word to understand the Hexagon, it's about tolerances, it's not about anything else. And what we do with the tolerances in PRINCE2 Agile is we set the time and the cost as 0 tolerance. Where we allow tolerance is in the quality criteria and the scope. So with the scope, we may drop out features. Admittedly, we can't drop out features that are must-haves. That's why at the bottom there it says fix and flex. We fix certain parts of the scope, but we flex parts that we can actually, you know, that we can live without. The same goes with quality criteria, and that word's really important. We're not talking about the quality level, we're talking about quality criteria. So it's an example I often use is, you know, something must work at 0 degrees, should work at -10 degrees, could work at -20 degrees. This is quality criteria. So as long as we deliver the feature that hits that requirement, then we're okay. Now in the middle you have benefits and risk, and you know, you can flex those if you like. You know, delivering a little less benefit might be an option. But what we're trying to say with that diagram is you go for the green areas. That is what you play with on a PRINCE2 Agile project. On the red areas, you know, close off that option. Don't go there. And if you are going to go there, you immediately cause an exception, and that will get escalated up to the project board. Now, I just want to concentrate on the 5 behaviours in terms of PRINCE2, and the 5 are in terms of PRINCE2 Agile, sorry. And the 5 are, as you can see on the screen there, transparency, collaboration, rich communication, self-organisation, and exploration. And these are the 5 we've identified because, and to be honest, if you like, they're missing from PRINCE2. Now, the reason they're missing from PRINCE2 is not a weakness of PRINCE2, It's that PRINCE2 is neutral and agnostic on management style. There's a lot of people that say PRINCE2 is command and control. Very ironic, because yes, you could run it command and control if you like, because PRINCE2 doesn't mind how you run it. But equally, you could manage it in a highly collaborative style. And as I say, this is where PRINCE2 is actually neutral. But in terms of guidance and trying to get PRINCE2 to work in an agile setting, you have to bring in these behaviours to get it to work. And you could say this is the most important area to get right. Now, what I'm going to do now is put my heart in my mouth and run a poll. Because what I'd like you to do is to tell me, out of those, with just those words in front of you, what you think, in your opinion, are the most important. Now, what I'm going to do is give you the 5 options, and I'd like you to pick 2, if you would please. So hopefully that's coming up on your screen now, and you can then select which ones you like, but pick 2. I'm trusting you all, so don't pick 3. And we'll give you a little bit of time, and it gives me a chance to have a drink of water. We've already got 2/3 of you voted. It's quite good. Now this is an exciting bit for me, because hopefully everything goes fine. I'm just going to close the poll there and have a look at what we've actually got. We do have a clear winner. And I'm just checking that you've got it up there. Right, I believe you have. Okay, so there are the results. And one of the things I quite like about doing these polls is it gives you all a chance to see what each other have actually put up there. Clear winner, collaboration, okay, by 78%. Rich communication, you know, half of you selected that one for 51%, got 51% votes. Self-organisation, transparency, and exploration down there as coming in as sort of 5th down there on 13th. But very interesting in terms of the figures coming through there, but such a high score. Basically 4 out of 5 of you have picked collaboration. But we're going to come to all of those now and just go through them, so I can tell you a little bit more about what they are, so that you can get a feeling of how important these things are, because it took the team a long time to actually choose those, and it was quite a powerful part of the whole process to actually decide on which these actually were. So let me go through them and start with the first one, which is called transparency. You know, what's the whole point of transparency? And in things like Scrum and Agile, this is a very big card that people play. And people, I think, make a slight mistake here, that they think about the visibility of things. They think about information radiators on the wall or what have you. But these ideas of visualization, the idea of being able to engage with things, I think is very important from a transparency point of view. But the really clever bit is if you can get a sort of openness, and it's sort of come rain or come shine, you're showing the information. Because we then go into slightly more powerful areas like trust. If the news is bad, are we still going to put this up on the wall? And you know, how we engage with each other is all part of that. And I think the picture there on the diagram, I think, says it all really. Now the next one you said was your top answer, which is collaboration. And my favourite quote, and I've been doing this quite a while, is if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. That's actually an African proverb, but I think it really epitomises what collaboration is. You know, respecting other views, collective ownership. But remember, this applies to inside the team, but also with the customer. And this is why we often have the customer on board. There's many sort of words and almost single words that I try to use to epitomise Agile, and I believe collaboration, in my opinion, is one of these. And that's why I've got no qualms with it being the top answer. Clearly the top answer. The third behaviour we have is about communication, and it's certainly one of my most frustrating parts as a sort of going in to help customers. I've I find that it's the classic problem. If you say what problems are you having, they say, I'm having communication problems. And then when you talk to them about what they're doing and they're moving a lot of email around, it's almost obvious how to solve this. And sometimes I'm standing in front of someone saying, why don't you walk over and talk to the person and see if you can just sort this out? And literally 30 seconds into the conversation, it's all solved. A phone call solves a lot of heated email exchanges. It just seems blindingly obvious to me, but I think you have to invest time and effort into this. It won't just happen. And the sort of email automatons that sit behind the sort of computer screens and try and manage a project with email, I think is almost becoming a curse to Agile. I don't think you can do it. You've got to talk to people, and you've got to get face to face. A very famous quote from someone called Eliot Spitzer. He's an American politician, or was. And I'm not sure that's actually accurate anymore, but I really think it personifies how to communicate. If you're writing something down, hang on a minute, can I talk? Then I'm going to phone. In fact, if I can see the person, maybe I'd better go and do face-to-face. And ironically, he says never put anything in an email, because I think he actually got caught out on something, and it all got a bit messy there, so we'll just leave that. Right, self-organisation, again, a very agile concept. Again, a hallmark. It didn't score as high as I thought. So all those 3 out of every 10 put self-organisation. I think it's a really fundamental agile concept, and that's why we brought it into PRINCE2 Agile. Trust the experts to get on with it, empower them. I think Agile needs this. But here's the rub, and some of the regulars will be used to me talking about this. Self-organisation is we decide how to get from A to B. What we don't decide is where B is. That's something what I call direction. This is where you need governance and control. And this is where self-organisation is so powerful, so useful. But if you just go too far and perhaps give people too much rope, it turns into anarchy, and it can be quite dangerous. Now, exploration is the one that scored lowest, and I'm not surprised by that either. We spent a lot of time trying to find out a term for this idea of continually seeking feedback, actively going after feedback. Again, as I keep saying to people, the customer knows roughly what they want. They don't know exactly what they want. Projects are difficult, they're complicated. That's why they're projects. That's why there's a lot of uncertainty and unknown. Now again, you're going to cringe, and some of the regulars are so used to this they'll be bored, but this is what we call the Spice Girls rule at KRC. Remember the line in one of their songs that says, tell me what you want, what you really, really want. This is what we're trying to do with exploration, and we're trying to do in PRINCE2 Agile, is to find out in the detail what is it they really, really want, because that's when we can deliver a more accurate solution. Now, Lean Startup is absolutely brilliant here. The more that I've sort of read about Lean Startup, and the more we try to bring into PRINCE2 Agile, it is phenomenal at this sort of obsession with if you like, feedback. It's really quite powerful stuff, and I think this whole idea of shortening the feedback loop, are we in the right place? Is this what you really want? It's quite a powerful thing that we try to amplify this behaviour in PRINCE2 Agile. Now, here's your quiz question for today. So if you're into the Spice Girls and you know them, you'll know that one of them is called Ginger Spice. And so send into your question box to Claire the answer to this question. And the question is, how do you link ginger spice, or not how, but who links ginger spice to a fizzy drink? Okay, I'll give you the answer at the end there. Get free quiz on these webinars. How good is that? Now, one thing I want to just touch on, only really quickly, but it's the servant leadership behaviour. And I just want to leave this out there because I'm going to do a lot more detail on this on a later sort of webinar. But this is quite a delicate area. There's a lot of things said about servant leadership being utterly fundamental to Agile. Scrum plays this card very, very heavily. But from what I see, it's really quite tricky to get this, what I call all-in approach to servant leader. Can you sort of be 80%? Can you go a long way? And in a project context, temporary teams, perhaps, this is quite difficult, and I think that's something we'll need to be aware of, and we address it very directly in PRINCE2 Agile because you can maybe destabilise a team if you don't address this properly. One of the people who helped us on the, only helped a little bit, but had quite a big impact really, is a guy called Dan North. And I remember him talking recently, and he said something which really stuck with me, which was, I hear a lot about servant, I don't hear too much about the second word. And I think that epitomises where some people maybe get servant leader wrong. And I do want to give a name check to someone else who also helped us on the PRINCE2 Agile project, a guy called Jeff Watts. And having talked to him, his view on servant leadership, again, I couldn't really go all the way, but he was the most lucid, erudite sort of views I'd heard on it. Very interesting guy to talk to, and his views are very much worth listening to. And I know he's written a couple of books. Sorry, I can't remember what they're called, but he spoke very, very informative. He spoke very well about servant leadership. So I would thoroughly recommend looking at some of the work that he's done, because I certainly agree it's got a lot of power, but it's how far you can go with this. Now, in the blog, if you've read the blog, we talked about sort of this whole behaviour thing. But how does that relate to process and sort of PRINCE2, and we go through this stage and that stage? And I could do with your views on this really. So there's another poll coming up. But what is more important, behaviours or process? You know, if you have a choice between a really good team and no process, or framework, or whatever you want to call it, or a really good process but not such a good team, you know, where would you go? Where would you put the emphasis? Now, I'm going to sort of lead the witness slightly here, because the answer is going to be behaviours, isn't it? But hold that thought, because you might not agree. So behaviours being much more important than process. But here's the tricky bit: how much more important do you think it is? And I don't really want to give you any numbers or anything to influence you straight away, but I'll be very interested to get your view on this. So in terms of an experiment here, if you had 100 coins on your desk in front of you, or 100 euros or pound coins, and the one side of the desk was how important behaviours, you know, principles, ethos, attitude, you know, the people stuff. How important was the behaviours? If that's over on one side of the desk, and then the framework and the process is over the other side, how would you distribute those 100 coins? So if you like, I'm looking for a ratio. So what would be the ratio here between the two? And this is what's coming on to the next poll question. So I'd really like to get your view in terms of, you know, what ratio would you say in terms of would make sense from those coins? And I'm sorry that it's a slightly contrived and slightly unusual question, and feel free to not take my premise that it is actually behaviours are more important. I'm very happy that somebody says, don't you Darren Brown me, I don't agree. And so in we go. Hey, this is interesting, and the stuff's coming in. We've got about 60% voted. Just give you another minute or two. And I think this is interesting, so let's have a look here. I'm going to close the poll now. Right, there are the results in terms of the ratios, and I didn't know how this was going to go, so this is quite interesting for me. I thought quite a few were going to go all in, you know, sort of, hey, it's all about behaviours. But only 3%, and that's very interesting. 7% have gone sort of, you know, 90%, 9 to 1, but huge body around sort of 80-20, 75-25. And really importantly, you know, 16%, none of the above. Now, I'll be straight with you, I didn't know how that was going to go at all, and I'm going to go away and mull over those, probably over the whole weekend, because I think that's quite interesting. But there is this premise that, yeah, hang on, behaviours are more important, but they're not the be-all and end-all. And one of the reasons for doing this is I do need many people in the Agile space that just say, all these techniques, all these processes, all these frameworks, it's just an irrelevance. It's a mindset. It's an attitude. And I'm sure some people are saying that on the poll there. But again, this is what I'd like to explore really. So I actually found that pretty interesting in terms of the result there. Okay. Now let me just try a bit more. I want to get to the questions soon, so I'm going to go quick on this slide. But one Agile technique that I think then helps with, if you like, your framework and your process is this idea of your retrospective. So as the poll has clearly indicated to me, people do understand fully that we need a framework. I've seen some brilliant people, brilliant teams with really poor process create some pretty bad results. So this is why I think process is really important, but it's not the be all and end all. But this is where your retrospective comes in terms of a key Agile technique, and I'm only just plugging this one technique in this particular area. But if every couple of weeks you're honing and fine-tuning the process, you're going to be in a much better place. So tune the process, fine-tune the process, and this is why if there's one thing you do in Agile, which is one of my biggest concepts that I really like, is the idea of inspect and adapt. Now, some of the people might spot that picture there. That is the Mercedes pit crew. They have absolutely shed loads of money, skills, computers, technology, and they are continually trying to improve something like a pit stop like that. If they can save 1/10 of a second, it can mean a massive amount to them in terms of performance. And they do this by continually changing and adapting the process as they go. And this is why even you can see there's a man at the front there with a jack, and the jack has got a swivel on it because that actually saves 1/10 of a second, and this is how things evolve. Those that are really, really sharp will also notice that's actually the pit stop that took Lewis Hamilton from first to third, so it doesn't always work, but well, maybe they're going to have a bit of a debrief. I'd certainly love to be in their retrospective after that race last weekend. I'd like to see what was written on their glad, sad and mad board for certain. So PRINCE2 is a challenge because it's difficult, it's context related, there's a lot in it, and this is why if the answer was easy, then so would the question be, but unfortunately life's not like that. Right, I'm now going to look at the questions that are coming in, and I'm going to hand back to Claire for a little bit. And if you make the questions as short as possible, you've got more chance of it getting answered because I have to read them all. So Claire, I'm going to bring you in now.
Great. So yeah, the launch is June 24th. I don't know whether we've mentioned that at this point. We will be running our first public course on June the 30th. Keith will be delivering the first 3 public courses. Sorry, we've got someone running on the pitch there. Keith will be running Keith will be running the first 3 public courses for us in London. I can't say after that, but we can guarantee he's going to run the first 3. So if you would like to attend a course run by Keith, then do get in touch with us. My email address will be up at the end, or you could just visit the website AgileKRC.com and all of the courses are there. It says there that we run regular webinars. These haven't been as regular over the last year while Keith has been locked in a darkened room writing PRINCE2 Agile, but normal service will be resumed as soon as possible. As it goes on to say, we help organisations with their transition to Agile. This includes consultancy, coaching, training, support services. We now also help you with recruitment, and we've had some excellent results building Agile teams over the last year. We pride ourselves on knowing what good looks like, so do get in touch if we can help you in that respect. Public courses there, as you can see, we're a bit of a one-stop Agile shop, so anything you need, do get in touch. We've also put the Axelos website details there, so if you do want more information, maybe you're a training organisation, maybe you're an individual, if you want more information about PRINCE2 Agile, obviously you can come to us, but you can also go and visit the Axelos website. And do follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube, and we will do our best to keep you up to date with this new course and qualification. So I'm going to hand you back to Keith, and we're going to take as many questions as we can.
Claire, that's excellent. Thank you very much. I'm looking at the time, it's 1:15. We normally end at 20 past. I'm going to go for 10 minutes and end at 1:25. If you do want to finish before then, feel free. We have got so many questions, I can't get through them all, but I'm going to try and get as many as I can here. A question from James. I'm concerned that PRINCE2 Agile will lead candidates to believe they're running true Agile projects, which won't be the case. How do you plan on marketing this? The interesting point about that question is I think there is an assumption that if you've just done PRINCE2 practitioner, you can manage a project. If you've done PRINCE2 Agile, you're now an Agile project manager. You know, I don't buy that, and I don't think customers do. I think it shows intent. It's a qualification. It's a bit like passing the driving test, really. If you can pass a driving test, that doesn't mean to say you're a good driver. It just means you've started on your journey of learning. Okay. I think. You know, the word in there, true Agile projects, links back to what I said earlier, which is more to do with, you know, what's an Agile project? It's not as simple as that. So James, I hope I've given you some indication there, but certainly this idea that I've got the badge, therefore I am, is something that we're keen that you know is not going to be the case. Let me try and find some more here. Is this a competitor to Agile PM version 2? It's in the same space. That's from Anthony. Again, we talked about that earlier on. Do you expect a kickback from Agile purists? Maybe, but I'm hoping it just goes into the wider debate. I mean, like I said, it's a fork. If you're trying to eat soup, don't use a fork. And I do worry about any purist in any form. There is an irony about the purist. You know, when you come up with something new and a purist says, you know, how very dare you, what do they do in a retrospective when someone comes up with a new idea? Do they go, oh, that's a good idea, or, you know, do they sort of, you know, escort them out of the room for thinking differently? Again, the market will decide. If there's a need, people will use it, and if there isn't, you know, they won't. Got a question here from Dave. Says Prince is fundamentally predictive and planned. Agile is empirical, focused on inspect and adapt. How can they possibly, well, I don't know, I'm assuming you said how can they possibly coexist. It might be how can they possibly coexist. I think the question's actually very fair, but the problem is that there's a little bit of baggage and there's a little bit of stereotype in there. To say Prince is fundamentally predictive is not really accurate, because if you look carefully at Prince, starting up a project is very much high level. Do we want to carry on? IP is a bit more, initiating a project is a bit more information. We don't do detailed requirements from the outset in Prince2. You only do that if you're doing Prince2 badly. Now, not only that, but a lot of the PRINCE2 Agile guidance is telling you how to bring empiricism into your planning process. So empiricism is mentioned throughout in terms of the PRINCE2 Agile guidance. And I actually think that the polarization you're saying there, Dave, which I can see where you're coming from, and I hear that, and this emotional, if you like, perception might be built out of the previous version of Prince2, but it's not what I see, and it's not what I find people who are doing Prince2 really well. It's not what sort of happens there. Okay. I've got a question here from Atif, and it says, do you think there's a danger from a perception point of view that Agile evangelists will think this is almost moving Agile towards inflexible, monolithic, or even waterfall type frameworks? We're at pains to point out in PRINCE2 Agile that this is not the case. A quick sort of, I don't know if this helps, but the word waterfall appears 0 times in the PRINCE2 manual. The word bureaucratic appears 0 times. Command appears 0 times. Hopefully getting the sort of feel here. Therefore, you use the framework exactly how you want to use it. If you want to run your stages, and I don't know how, Atif, I don't know how much you know your Prince2, but if your management stages are about delivering a set of features, well, that's a very agile way of working. If it's about delivering a technical phase, well, that's a waterfall way of working. But that's not Prince's fault. That's you using, using Prince in the wrong way, or not saying the wrong way, but not in an agile way. And again, we explore a lot of that in the PRINCE2 Agile guidance. What else have I got here? Let's see if I can. I've got someone from Damien, and it says, in my understanding, Scrum is for product delivery and PRINCE2 is for project management that can work together. Is PRINCE2 Agile somewhere in between? I really like that question, Damien. The short answer is no. It's not in between. It is actually joining those two concepts together. So we have something in PRINCE2 Agile that's known as the layer cake, or the pink sponge. You need to see it to believe it. But there are 3 levels. So at the top you have sort of governance and direction. In the middle you have project management. And at the bottom you have product delivery. Now at the bottom layer, this is where Scrum is very good. But at project management and project governance, Scrum doesn't do that. It's not that it's poor at it, it just doesn't do it. Whereas PRINCE2 is very good at this. Now, one of the biggest points of PRINCE2 Agile was to merge these 3 layers, and it's what we call blend and weave. We try to bring as much Agile thinking up into those project management and project direction layers, and we try to bring in control down into the sort of product delivery layer, because Scrum is built for fundamentally a BAU context. It's not built for a project. It's not a project management method. And therefore, we're trying to blend and weave and link these two together. So we're not pitching it in the middle. We're actually taking those things you've so correctly described and you know, actually merging them together. But really importantly is to not do it in a sort of parallel universe way. We're not trying to bolt on Agile to the bottom of PRINCE2. We're actually trying to fully sort of integrate it and sort of interlock it, if you like. What else have we got here? What have we got here? Lean startup requires VC type governance, so I guess that's venture capital type governance and steering based on short feedback. How have you built this into the steering and governance? That's a question from Dave. The analogy between a startup, you know, a small startup company, and a project, they're very good metaphor one for the other. So, you know, VCs have got investing money. They want quick feedback as to whether that investment is sound. The same goes with a steering group or a project board on a project. So again, we bring that into PRINCE2 Agile. And one of the things we look at is in more volatile projects is getting those shorter management stages to keep checking on, if you like, project validity. Lean startup is particularly good in an area which is known as disruptive. A lot of Agile people are working in disruptive environments. In PRINCE2 Agile, we mentioned 3D printing as an example, and therefore these short feedback loops and some of the almost the DNA of Lean Startup is extremely useful. But as a lot of people who helped on the book pointed out, you know, Lean Startup can go across, you know, a lot of areas, and if you're launching a new, I don't know, pet insurance product, you know, maybe it's a bit easier and a bit more, you know, a bit less disruptive. But this idea of the sort of, what's the correct word? The sort of simile, or the, I can't think of the right word, but the similarity between a VC and a project board, you know, that worked pretty well together. And as I say, I've been doing this quite a while, and it takes a lot to make me go, cool, that's interesting. But certainly Lean Startup was pretty impressive, and we're so pleased a lot of it we managed to get into the actual book. A question from Adam: what does PRINCE2 bring to Agile? Well, I would say the ability to work in complex situations, the ability to have sort of governance and control when there's a lot of moving parts. If it's a small team, you're working on an existing product, everybody knows what they're doing, it's very much a maintenance, ongoing environment, don't use PRINCE2. You could use just Scrum straight out of the box there. So PRINCE2 would actually bring you problems if you used it in that environment. But if you're using it in something complicated and complex, you know, then you're going to need to scale it up. And since 2001 and the Agile Manifesto, you know, certainly in the last 10 years, this whole thing about how do we work Agile in complex, geographically dispersed situations, multi-team, legacy technology. It's not a question of one team in a room, one product owner, one backlog. How do we make this work? And this is why wrapping Scrum, and Scrum is the most common Agile method by a mile, bringing that in, fully integrating it with PRINCE2 Agile. And as I say, the Scrum guide is in the PRINCE2 Agile manual, and it's the definitive guide of Scrum, is to say, these two, work pretty well together. If you're using Scrum in a complicated situation, you're going to need to, as I say, you're going to need to do a little bit more than just start with a backlog. Final question. Let me have a little look. What have I got here? What is the role of the project manager? In Scrum framework, this role doesn't exist. That's from David. And we go into a lot of detail about how the project manager fits. And you have a slightly bigger problem actually when integrating Scrum into PRINCE2 sometimes with how do you work out the team manager. If you have a mature Scrum team, they work well between the product owner and the Scrum Master, and they actually share some of the team manager duties, as purely defined in PRINCE2. And this is why we give a lot of guidance that sometimes you can just put a straightforward team manager into the team. Sometimes you need to, make what are called points of contact, but we explain how to do that. Now, the project manager, the role is reasonably untouched, because if it's a project, you need a project manager. If it's not a project, then it's BAU, you don't need one. One thing, and I'll sort of end on this, is that a lot of people in the Agile community are saying we don't need project managers anymore. I don't agree. Whenever I talk to these people and I say, how do you do complicated pieces of work, they might call it a product manager or a chief banana. I don't mind what they call them, but they're actually a project manager. If something is finite, it's difficult, it needs to be justified. That's a project. It doesn't matter what you call it, and you need someone to manage it. It doesn't matter what you call that person either. So the project manager, I think, is always going to exist, but only in a project context. Right, we have got so many questions, I'm not so sure I'll be able to even write these up or get back to them. Do appreciate your questions, we'll go through them, we'll maybe cherry pick a few. You never know, I might get time over the weekend to have a look at it and write stuff up. I'm going to sign off pretty quickly now, but the one thing I do want to say is that we normally do these webinars on a Friday, so if you think it's Friday and the weekend's starting, I'm really sorry, but it's actually only Thursday. And we'd like to get your feedback as well as to whether you actually prefer the Thursday to the Friday. Please email Claire on that one. But I hope you've got something from the webinar. Please feel free to feedback. And for the time being, thank you very much for listening, and bye for now.